What's going on, people? I wanted to speak a little bit about Bernard Hopkins. I was watching some videos last night about his story, and it's pretty remarkable. I mean, this guy has one of the greatest stories in boxing, and in my opinion, boxers, they have the greatest stories of any sport, of any athletes in any sport, and probably of any type of people in any sport. I mean, some of the stories you hear from some of these guys are just incredible, but Bernard Hopkins' story is ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy who was from Philadelphia, started boxing as a young age, started winning all these amateur stuff, and then he gets involved into the street life, which was very predominant in the Philadelphia area where he was from. Gets arrested over 30 times, I think he said, a bunch of times, ends up going to jail, juvenile, I think it was, or it might have been actual prison, I don't know what it was, for a few years. Now, a lot of people, big misconception about Bernard Hopkins is that he started boxing in jail. That's not true. He was boxing already before that. But he starts to, take boxing more seriously in jail. He gets back into boxing, becomes the number one boxer in his jail. And back then, they had the different jails in Pennsylvania that they would box against each other. It was like a tournament. So this prison versus this prison. And they were like tournaments and stuff. This was to get the people to, kind of do something positive. And Bernard Hopkins, he became the number one boxer in the penal system, in the penitentiary system in Pennsylvania. He then, after he gets out of the jail, being the number one guy in prison, he's like, I'm dedicating myself to boxing. He gets into boxing. His first professional fight is a 4-round fight, and he loses his first pro fight, which is very rare for an all-time great Hall of Famer, world champion to lose their first pro fight, but he loses it. I think he then goes, fights his next professional fight a few years later, wins a few, does his thing. He then goes and fights Roy Jones Jr. in 1993. Now, at this point in time, Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins were not what we look at them now today as Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins. They weren't, these great champions and these legends of the sport. At that point in time, neither guy had won a title before up until that point, and they weren't even the main event fight, because the main event fight for that card was Riddick Bowe and Jesse Ferguson, I think that was the main event. So they were an undercard to Riddick Bowe and Jesse Ferguson. So that just shows you how everyone starts somewhere and never stop hustling, because they were undercard fighters, the same way all these guys were undercard fighters at some point, pretty much. He loses that fight. He then 2 years later has a fight versus Sando Mercado. He has a draw. He then beats him in the rematch. And this is in 1995. He goes from 1995 to 2005, I think it was, racking up middleweight title defenses, breaking records, because he had the record for the most middleweight title victories consecutively in the history of boxing. I think he broke Carlos Monzon's record, and he sets history. He then, years later, goes up to light heavyweight, dominates, wins a bunch of big fights there, and becomes the oldest champion in the history of boxing, breaking George Foreman's record when he was 44 years old as a heavyweight champion. Bernard Hopkins, he broke his record, becoming the oldest champion in the history of boxing when he became light heavyweight champion, when he beat Jean Pascal. And Pascal was 16, 17, 18 years younger than him, whatever he was. And he beat him at 45 years old or whatever he was, 46. Still was champion until he was, I think, 48. So that's just crazy. Most middleweight title defenses of all time. Most oldest champion in history when he broke, George Foreman's record. And he's world champion at 48 years old. And his career, the theme of his career was, and this is what motivated Bernard Hopkins, was that every time he had a big fight, a lot of people discounted him and said, nah, you're not going to beat Trinidad. Nah, you're not going to beat Kelly Pavlik. Nah, you're not going to beat, John Pascal. You're not going to beat the new guy. You're too old. You're too past it. You're not going to beat Tarver. But what motivated him was proving all these people wrong. He lived the strictest lifestyle. He was never 5 pounds over his fight weight. That's what I read. Never, ever 5 pounds over his fight weight. Never ate fried food, of course. Soda, nothing like that. And he's so dedicated to boxing, and I read this story online, that he missed his sister's wedding because he was training for a fight. So his level of dedication is just tremendous. If you want to see proper fundamentals in boxing, Hopkins, man, he knows every little trick in the book, how to score, how to not get hit, how to hold. You know, he would throw like a counter right hand, and then when it hit the guy, he would turn it into like he quickly like hooks onto the guy to hold him so the guy can't hurt him. And he had every trick in the book. I know sometimes people would say he's a little dirty, but whatever, it's a fight in there. And he knows, you know, every single, you know, he's like the old man at the park whenever you play any sport, like let's say basketball, and like he has the fundamentals. He's not the fastest, maybe. He's not the strongest, but he just knows how to win. And that's really what you'll remember most about Bernard Hopkins' career. You know, they have an Ali movie, great movie. Well, whatever. And they have movies about a lot of other boxers, Roberto Duran. You know, I know they're making a Mike Tyson documentary, but where's the Bernard Hopkins movie? Because they should make one, because he's got one of the best stories in the history of boxing. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Peace.